Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Angular. This week on our panel we have Lucas Paganini.
Hey Chuck, good to be back again.
Yeah, I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. And this week we're talking to Marek Panti. Did I get close on your name?
Yeah, it was perfect. Thank you. Sure, I'm Angular developer from Bratislava. Basically, I started my career as a designer, but later on I realized that it wasn't as creative as I thought. So I became more and more into coding, and I became a big fan of front-end and Angular, but also I do a little bit of Node.js and Python and things like this. But yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, we ran across your article about Angular standalone components and some of the things that you had there around the architecture of the app and stuff like that. Do you want to kind of give us the high-level view on what standalone components are and how they work, just for people who are newer and may not know what they are?
Sure. So this is a little bit longer topic, but the thing is that until recently, Angular had everything wrapped up into modules. So it means that you had one-page app divided into a couple of feature module, and in the highest level of the Angular app, you had a router, and that router lazy loaded each model. So if you went to a specific route, for example, home or dashboard, it got the module dashboard. But then the trouble was that if the dashboard was big, you still got that big thing lazy loaded. And if you wanted to have some other division, you needed to create another submodule of that feature module and lazy load it to submodules. And there was another issue that if you had a shared module of some directives, utilities, helper functions, and so on, and you imported that shared module into some feature module, you imported basically the whole bucket of functionality, even though you used only one method. And then you had a question whether, like if you were about to write a new directive, which would be in a shared directory, for example, you had a question whether you will import it into the shared module or create some small submodule which would be imported in some feature module. And basically with standalone components, we get rid of this, how to say it, of this robust thinking, but and it allows us to have a better granularity, basically. But just let me go a little bit back in the history, how this modularity started. It was, I think, 2012 or 11 when Angular was created, and up until this time, there wasn't really there was only 2 or 3 front-end frameworks, and none of them was designed, or we really didn't know that we will do all application in browser. And later we didn't know that we will use Angular for mobiles and then for everything. So it was a little bit different kind of thinking. And in that case, module made sense, because the thinking behind the modules was that it won't be as big. It will be like granularized, and yeah, it was a little bit thinking like in backend. But then React came with sort of better modularity, and Angular team realized it. I think it was version 8, but it was very hard to do this separation in the engine. So now I think now is the time.
So it sounds like there's, I guess, more to the architecture discussion here than
Definitely.
because when I initially started thinking about like standalone components versus I guess like a fully blown Angular app, I was just thinking, okay, this is just feature A, feature B, but it's not. There's more to it than that. So yeah. So how do you start making the decision? Hey, I need a standalone component here versus, building in a full, I guess an app that I would normally think of that Angular does.
So it's very easy. You should either decide at the beginning when you are starting create the app,
Mm-hmm.
or if you want to refactor it, you need to think that you need to refactor everything. Luckily, it is quite easy to refactor it to standalone architecture. But how you should think about it? Well, the first thing is you have to realize if your team is flexible. Like if you have 3 teams and you are in some robust corporation and everything needs to be approved by management, and you are not able to explain the benefits of transforming to standalone components, I think this situation can be hard. Then I would rather continue with modules and maybe in 3 years start talk about it. But this I can imagine that could be trouble because it will take some time to transform it. But if you are starting an app from scratch, I would recommend using the standalone architecture. It has really a lot of benefits, and I would say that the 2 biggest benefits, beside others, are is the granularity and also the lazy loading, because each component can be now lazy loaded in a router level. And also we have standalone directives and pipes. So and also the app component, which is now in a highest part of the app, can be standalone as well, and that app component will bootstrap the application.
One thing that I thought was interesting, that made me click on your argument, and I think it would be beneficial to clarify that to the audience, is even before we had standalone components, correct me if I'm wrong, even before, we could already benefit from the most important advice that you're giving him here, because you're actually giving 2 advices. One is to prefer standalone components, standalone pipes, and etc. over ng modularized components. But the other more important advice is that your whole application should not be in a single module. So, for example, you should not have many things defined in a feature module or any other kind of module. So, even before we had standalone components in Angular, so
Definitely.
for everyone that is running Angular 13 or before, they can already benefit from the structure by having modules that define a single component, such as what Angular Material used to do, right? So, you have a module just to import
Yes.
and define a single component. And that is the most beneficial advice here, because that will later make it easy to isolate those things in even other libraries if you want to isolate and reuse. That's right.
Exactly. Basically, before I start to talk about it, we need to say that everything is about good software. Yeah, if you have something written in a very spaghetti mode, each change or each thing which you want to change is hard and difficult. And sometimes you can be in a decision whether this wrong code base shouldn't be done from scratch, because there are some situations where refactoring could take actually longer than rewriting it. And to this, what we are talking today is basically those points are about collaboration. So if you are 5 or more developers, if you want to have a sustainable code base which would be possible to maintain even after 10 years from now on, those are, let's say, some basic things. Yeah, because because of course we can be very strict. We can have 80% code coverage, for example. We can have Like that, there are a lot of things which can be done, but this is this architectural point of view is just like the higher overview on the app, how to make it maintainable, I would say it. So from like my experience is that I was working on a lot of 3 to 4 month projects beside my main work, and this is where I learned some of the most practical things from the architecture points. And the first thing is that on 50% of projects, after some time, they realize that we want to have another app and another app, and we want to have it together. Basically, in some time, they realize that maybe we should have a monorepo, or we should think about micro app architecture. And if you want to have a monorepo or micro app architecture, you need to copy basically some of the common models into libraries, and then having some separate applications which are connected in some common dashboard or something like this. Yeah, now imagine a situation that you are starting an app, and when you think about this upfront, then this decision to bring your monorepo or micro app is very easy, because you just copy your modules into libraries and that's it. You have it's maybe work for 2 to 3 days. It's not a work for half a year then. Yeah, and from this point we can talk about some details. For example, my suggestion is that authentication is always a separate module, because that authentication will be later used for each of your projects, and it will be in a library. If not, it's not a problem. Yeah, because it will be only a separate module in your app. Then my another suggestion is to create a so-called, at least I call it, a signed-in module. And that signed-in module is basically your whole application. It is just that at the beginning, if you are not signed in, you decide whether you go to that signed-in module or to that authentication module. And that signed-in module will have the logic with all the user permissions, and there will be other lazy loaded feature modules connected to that signed-in module. Yeah, and then also another big topic is the state management. And I think this is one of the most crucial things, because also from my experience, a lot of people use either NGRX or no state at all. And this is very sensitive thing, because again, NGRX is very robust thing, and it has a big boilerplate. Yeah, we need to admit that it is good, of course, but it's good for big teams. When you have 2 to 3 front-end teams, it's very good to have this NGRX, because you have one structure, and you are used to the system that maybe the development will get a bit slower, but it is consistent. But if you have a smaller app where you are 2 to 3 developers, you can use or you can benefit from some easier solutions. Yeah, you can even use some typed behavior subjects, which would be stored in a service facade, and that subject would basically would hold the data structure to the same level as your view does, and from that point you can just use your async pipe, yeah, and you are done. And also when you are using the behavior subject, it is very easy to recognize whether you need to do some data update. So when you destroy some component and come back, you don't need to reload your data from API. It's a very, very easy thing. Yes. So, but when you are using this behavior subject, the development, from my experience, is maybe from 15 to 20% faster than if you have the NGRX. Because the problem is that on a smaller project, if you are using the NGRX, you need to think strongly about things like, is my property loading? Is it in edit states? And those too small metadata, you need to store them somewhere. And usually in smaller projects, everything is done in very big speed. And then you don't have time for these decisions, and then the NGRX become very badly managed. So it's a bit counterproductive. So basically, there are a lot of points which needs to be covered up front, from my
Funny that
experience.
you mentioned that, because the last episode that we recorded was with AiA, and we were talking exactly about that. So we had the entire last episode
Nice.
discussing some native, like not native, but a seed solution that you can build and reuse for your projects in terms
Mhm.
of state management, or just go directly with NGRX. And Ayash was explaining the solution that she created, and every time she starts a new project, she starts with that base structure for state management. And this does not use NGRX, but it does have a
Yes.
simpler way to manage state. And then later on, sometimes the company chooses to migrate to NGRX. A lot of times they don't, and they just keep this seed project due to the simpler. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Exactly.
interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And also there are other things, yeah, because if you are using NGRX and at the same time you have a test coverage policy on front end, it's a little bit it's a little bit complicated to have all the tests for your effect, because for effect you need marbles.
Mhm.
And again, I remember that that the marbles, that there is some mocked RxJS which has been changed during last 3 years, I think 2 or 3 times. So on each update you need to rewrite all your tests, and I'm not sure if if this is really a good direction.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, because in the
Honestly,
architecture point of view, you need to think also about unit tests.
yes, yes. I don't know
So
if you looked into it, but one of the best things that I've done, what that my team has done in our projects, is to use NGRX data instead of vanilla NGRX. I don't know if you looked into that, but it's really interesting, because that means that we don't have to create so
yeah,
much boilerplate for every store. So we don't have to
yeah,
create
yeah,
each
exactly.
individual
Yeah,
effect and then the
it was
mocked test for
it's
each
from
effect.
last year, I
Yes.
think.
Yes. A much cleaner approach. So if you want to have task-driven development with NGRX from the beginning, if you're using something like NGRX data, it gets much easier on your side.
Definitely, but all two things are like after 4 years of intense work on front end, I realized that this world is quite complex, and there is a lot of things which can go wrong from the beginning, and then it's really very hard to refactor it, because some say that yeah, you should, when you are doing the refactoring, you should do it like step by step. But this step-by-step approach is usually not really possible. Like even if I was in some work environment where I had allocated time for refactoring, I knew that I just need to do it like at once, because the step-by-step is simply not working. So and this can be very tricky, because when everything is everywhere, then it gets very very bad. And regarding this test-driven development, there are, like on front end, there are a couple question marks, and the first question mark is whether you need some percentage of test coverage, because in my opinion, you don't need to have like 80% test coverage on front end, because most of the tests would be click on button, the button was clicked. This is not something you really need. Uh, this will be it will just take time to maintain it. What you need is to test your facades and your validation services, your helpers, your utilities, and this is enough. The rest will be covered. But then you don't have the test, but then you cannot have test-driven development, but you can have something, I call it method-driven development, and it's basically I write a method name before I start a new feature. Like I simply down all the methods, and in comments I write the return value. Yeah, and then I start developing it. And with that system, you can be quite efficient. It's fast, and it's more or less the same as test-driven development without the need of maintaining everything.
Yeah, I think our test driven development is always a debating topic. Like we should allow that, like we should use that in our component or not, because it depends on a lot of things. I think in real scenario, a lot of times you will not know all the things before deploying. Like you'll experiment with something, then come up with the approach. So yeah, and any type of testing for unit testing can be, I think, from front end test development, the TDD is most. I i i haven't seen much company or team using that as a practice, like in backend. So in backend it's little easier to go with
Yeah,
TDD than
Also,
the
you
front
were
end.
talking about the testing for facades and state management. I would even go one step further on that. So, and I think this is going to be a popular topic because it is what I say in my most popular video so far. So the most popular video I have is a video about how to organize front-end projects. And the insight that I talk in this video, that I say in this video, the biggest insight is to isolate your API calls. So even I think that this is relevant here because I think that even the state module can be broken into two. Because one thing is for you to manage the data
yes,
that is already cached in your front end and you just want to distribute that. And another responsibility entirely is how do you connect the front end to the back end, which when you create a new user, what exact API route does it make the request to? What is the method used in this HTTP request? How the headers are allocated? All those things, I believe that they can be isolated. And I think I'll go even one step further and say that I think that they should even be framework agnostic. I see no reason for those things to be Angular specific. You could even say, oh, it needs to be
exactly.
Angular specific so that we can use the HTTP client. You can use the HTTP client and still make it framework agnostic. You just have to create a library that connects the browser, the front end, to your API. And then in your library, you can take the fetch function as an argument. I did that before. I created a library that when you instantiate the API client, you can optionally give it the fetch function. So if you don't give it, it's just going to use the browser native fetch function. But if you give it a fetch function, it's going to use the custom one. So what I did is if I'm running my API client in an Angular application, I give it the HTTP client formatted in a fetch function. And then the API client internally uses the Angular HTTP client. So this way, you can even break the state module that we were talking about in two. You can have the API client, which is simply responsible for making connections to the backend and requesting and receiving data from the correct endpoints. And you can have another layer, which is your data management, your front-end data management, which then you would have the discussion between using NGRX or
Yes.
not, or any other solution. But that way, I think it becomes even more decoupled.
I fully agree. And as from what you said, is that in this case, this API management would means that you can have different front-end apps in different frameworks, and they all will share our services. Yeah, and this HTTP client or fetch would be just a variable. Yeah, it's I completely agree because this is the granularity which we need, especially for a big project, and the developers need to learn and understand that this is something what we need. I have a friend, and this is a bit of a funny thing. He says that developers, sometimes we are masochists because we write harmful things which harms our colleagues, and and yeah, then we have headaches. But the reality is that when I had junior colleagues which learned this granularity concept, then they realized that developing new feature to such architecture is so easy. Like then everything becomes very easy, and you know immediately what needs to be done. Also, if I come to a new project which is where architecture is like that, it takes me maybe less than 1 day to understand which functionality is where. In comparison, if everything is somewhere, then it can be even 6 months. So that's the difference.
And it's not just the overhead of the developer's understanding, right? It's also faster in terms of actual computing
Yeah.
speed for development, because if you're using NX or Turbo Repo, any kind of monorepository system, they will most likely have a way to build and rebuild only the part of the system that you made changes to. So if you have things in a more granularized
Yes.
way, and you make a change to a single module, it doesn't rebuild the whole application. It just rebuilds
Yeah,
that
exactly.
single module. So even for actual development workflow, it's much
Yeah,
faster.
and this is also another of the things. Like sometimes when I open Google Chrome and I have more, like I don't know, 10 tabs, and I look on my RAM and it has 6 gigabytes, I'm not sure if this is correct. Because the modern technology allowed us to become a bit lazy. And this laziness is basically also killing projects. Yeah, because you can just start writing your random code, and after 3 or 4 years you realize that even a small change takes you 1 week of work. So then basically it kills the project, because you actually can bring your project to the point where it's not possible to maintain. And yeah.
And Marek, what advice would you have for the developers just joining a startup and trying to convince, not convince in the bad way, not in a manipulative way, but convince in terms of explaining the reasons why? So, how can a new developer in a startup explain to the business side of the company why the developers should take some time to decide on a better architecture for the project if it's just starting out, or if it has already started out? How can they justify to the business side that they need to stop for a little while and refactor that structure before it gets
Yeah.
harder to refactor later? So and I'm trying to come up with something in terms of the tech debt is not big enough that it became noticeable to the
Yeah, I
business side
understand.
yet. So it's not in a terrible state yet, but it's coming to that direction.
Actually, it's quite easy. There are two possibilities. The first is just you start a small talk with your management and you see whether they are open-minded or they have some structure. If they are open-minded, and so you will explain all the arguments which were said here on or in your previous podcast, I think on 80% they will just take it and they will understand it. And also, I would recommend to have some example, to have some small project and some example to show it to them. And then very good metaphorical example is electricity in a house. So when the electricity is nicely documented and all cable is shown on a project, and you need to do some change or you need to have a new light switch, then it's easy to connect it. But when you buy a 100-year house, and you want to do some connection, and you call 3 electricians, and no one knows what needs to be done. Yeah, so this is.
You've worked on the
I
electrical in my
love this
mom's house.
perfect
That's what you're telling
analogy.
me.
Yeah, so I was living in Sydney for 2 years, and we were renting an old house. So yeah, that's which wasn't documented. So yeah, and then the other
Yeah, the way
approach
we
is
figure out
sorry.
which circuit the fuses go to in my mom's house is we have somebody go stand in the room we're trying to kill power to, and then we start flipping switches and they yell when it turns
Yeah,
off.
yeah, I know that.
I'm not even joking. The timing of this analogy was so perfect that 15 minutes before this episode, I was trying to use the microwave to heat up my lunch, and it wasn't working because somebody is trying to fix the electricity. And I was like, "Hey, can you please just turn on the power to the microwave so that I can use it?" And they were like, "I don't know which one is it. Let me go try some here, and then you let me know." And we were like 10 minutes trying out different connections until we made it work. So this was the perfect timing for this example.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I have had the exact same thing happen with the code, right? Where it's like okay, I need to go add this feature or whatever, right? And so I'll go modify the code where I think the thing is, and yeah, I run my test and nothing changes, and so then it's actually over here. And especially with my client projects, there's been a feature or a couple of features that I've been adding into these integrations that I've been writing for the last few months, and it's literally been one thing after the other where it's, I just figured out that this was the thing that was holding me up, to which somebody else on the team goes, I knew that, right? But it took me 2 weeks to figure out what they could have told me in
Yeah,
2
exactly.
minutes.
Yeah.
And it's because the code isn't set up that way to give you the kind of information you need.
What I was saying is in my at the first job, I had an example of like it was a pretty old project, kind of 15-year project with JSF, and we proposed to convert that to Angular when just Angular came, just Angular 2 came. So what my approach was like, develop a whole full application with and as a POC. So we put Angular as a front end and Spring Boot as a back end, and showcase that how it's easy and how it's easy to tweak these things. And if you want to change something, now it's taking suppose a week, and it will take a day or half a day to change and showcase. So then they agree, and then the whole project changed to Angular and Spring Boot. So that's, I think, the better way to justify a business is to give a monetary value, then like okay, so this will going to save this much a developer time, and developer cost is this much, and you are saving this many dollars. And
Yes, but some things
that's
are
the
not
good way
possible
to approach.
to measure,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
it's like measuring, like if you have some company and you have the billboards, you cannot really measure how much revenue it gives you, but it gives you the, how to say, it gives you the profit, that if somebody new comes to the project, he knows where you are. And there are a lot, and also you are happy because I can get really frustrated when I look on the code, and I can even go away from such a company if they don't want to change it. But also regarding the management, yeah, it can happen that they will say, no, I won't give you the additional time, and they won't understand it. It can happen. Then you have like two possibilities. Yeah, if you want to stay in that project because you like it, I will just put higher estimates on everything, and I will do that architecture without explaining it to the management. I will just explain it to the team leader, to my software colleagues. And if your developing team has this understanding, then you are basically safe. because it can happen that your project manager is not the manager of the app, and he doesn't understand it, and there is some higher hierarchy, and it's hard to communicate this issue to the correct person. It can happen. Then I would just do it on a software on a developing team, and I would just have a higher estimate, and that's it.
I am going to take a guess here. I don't know if that exists or not, but I think that somebody has already had this trouble in such a hard way that they created the solution. So I'm going to bet that the universe has created the solution that I'm about to say, which is I think that there is a standardized way of calculating the developer onboarding in a project. So, I'll something, for example, create a component, fix this bug, and create a service. I don't know, like a set of instructions that you would give to a developer that deeply understands the technologies involved, but may not understand your project structure, gives to this developer and tells them to do those three things. So, how long it takes for a new developer to do those things. So, if you can create such a metric, and if that doesn't exist, it's probably easy to create in your company, in your project. So if you did all the things that we discussed here, you're still having trouble with management, I would say try to come up with a set of instructions that you can give to somebody that doesn't work in your project but understands Angular, and tell them to do those things. Track how long it takes, and then you give this metric to the management side of your business and ask for this person to do the same thing in another project that is using this better structure. And then this other project can be a project from scratch or something like that. And this way you can tell the business side, hey, a new developer joining the company is going to take this X amount of time to do those simple tasks that every developer will have to do eventually in this project. So this can give you a metric to show to them, which it can be kind of flawed because it depends on the person that takes it, but at least it is a metric. I think it's easier to talk to management in terms of metrics, because that way that's how they would like to see all areas. Like, not saying that in a bad way, but the easiest management ever is when all areas have some kind of performance metric that is quantifiable, and then you can simply try to make that metric better, either making it shorter, or if it's a good metric such as profit, then you want to enlarge that. So if you can translate your issues into metrics, I think that's a good way to talk to the business side.
This is a really nice approach. I really like this.
My approach has always been, I had clients that basically told me that I'm not paying you to write tests. I'm not paying you to, fiddle with all the architecture stuff, just cram features in.
Mm-hmm.
And what that eventually wound up with, because I found that I could move as fast or faster doing TDD with my projects. And so I just put the test directory under git ignore and then do them anyway.
That's genius.
Yeah, it's actually exactly as I told before, that you should do it anyway, and yeah. Yeah, because this good architecture is not only for the project and for the company. It's even for you as a developer. Like, it won't hurt you. Otherwise, if something is wrong, and especially in modern JavaScript days, when you have a library which is supported until some time, and once someone decided that I'm not gonna support this library, we'll use something else, but you have new Angular which you cannot update because you are using that old library which is deprecated. In this case, it's a must to have a perfect architecture. Otherwise, you will go crazy.
Let's recap some things here, Marek.
Mhm.
So help me out if I miss something. Just because we talked about so many things that the audience may have some trouble trying to collect all the insights. So let's recap for a person that is just starting a new project, or maybe already has a project but liked our idea, and so they want to separate their Angular application into modules that can be later even isolated in libraries
Yeah.
using NX or some other monorepo solution. So uh, we talked about generic things that most applications will benefit from. So most applications will need a state module, which later can become a state library. And this will be responsible for managing the cached state that you have in your application and distributing that in a reactive way to all the consumers. We can also, so that's one. We can also have another, which would be a library or a module responsible just for the connection between the front end and the back end. It could also have the TypeScript definitions, the types for what you get from the backend and what the backend expects to receive. So we already have two. You in the beginning you mentioned another one, which would be the
Yes.
authentication module or signing module. So that one would be fully responsible for the authentication side of your front end application. And what else can we give for somebody in this situation? So they are either starting a new project or they want to use this structure in their current project, but maybe they don't know how they should separate concerns. So we
Mhm.
already gave them three things that are probably applicable to their scenario. What else can we give into advice of common structures that
Yeah,
somebody can use
if I can generalize it
for
and
that
start
scenario?
like from beginning, you should start with answering on some questions. Is my application gonna be big, medium, or small? Is it for a public or is it for business to business cases? Yeah, and based on these questions, you need to decide like, yeah, if it's gonna be big, if it's gonna be or medium and for public, I will use NGRX, like official NGRX. I will have some, at least a minimum of unit tests, and I will start. If it's big, I will start directly with the monorepo because the things will come. If it's small, it's exactly, we will start with the small granular modules, and we need to have in our mind that this model could be possibly later become part of library. And another topic is to think about also style guide upfront. You have to install your prettier linter and have strict TypeScript. And also, I think also there is this SCSS architecture, at least. So you should think whether you will have some dark mode or things like this. Because if your app will be small and you know that your app will be small, in this case, you might not have such a strict rules for SCSS, and you could have random colors in your components. Yeah, but if you know that your app is gonna be big, you need to also take care about your SCSS. That's a different topic.
And what about the feature modules? How how can people break that down into more granular structures? For example, let's say that I have a system and I have the users module. So I have a list of users in my system. I have groups. I may have files, like uploaded files. Let's talk about a to-do app.
Yeah.
Everybody's familiar with that. So you have tasks, you have users, you may have groups or teams. So let's say that you have those three things, those three types of resources in your system: users,
Tasks.
groups, and tasks. Would you create a library for each, or um, would you just put all of them in the main core application and not break it down in terms of feature, or would you make it even more granular, and inside of users you would make maybe the some of the functionalities of interacting with users in a folder and the actual visual components in another? So how would you make your architecture for
Mm-hmm.
the feature modules in the case of a
Yeah,
to-do
like
application?
basically now I would start with standalone components, which would be like feature standalone components. So we would have tasks component, users components, and what was the third? It was task users and settings. Groups. Sorry, yeah.
Groups.
And then in the users,
Groups.
I would have another even more granular components and services which would be connected to the main. And in the app level, we would have router which would lazy load these free features. Like now, I think if you are doing the app from scratch, I really recommend to start it with a standalone component. It has a lot of benefits, and you a lot of it will save a lot of trouble. And also the standalone components, they push you to make granular architecture.
And what about actual monorepo technologies? Do you have a favorite? Is the Grand NX, or do you have some other monorepo technology that you
This is
particularly
a good
like?
question. Yeah, for me it's NX, and just because of the big support, and they have a lot of things already inbuilt, and also you have some. It is possible now to track your package JSON and the updates and the vulnerabilities, and if something needs to be updated or if something is deprecated. I think this is great handled within NX. But now, at the end of last year or in the middle of last year, the npm brought its own monorepo. To be honest, I haven't tried it yet, but I think this can be also really great. And also, I think Lerna and others are good. I just don't have experience with them, so I cannot compare.
You're talking about
Yeah,
npm
sorry, yeah.
workspaces? Oh yeah, yeah. I played a bit with that. I don't know if it could compete with NX, to be honest, because NX also integrates so well with the Angular ecosystem that npm
Yeah,
workspaces
then
could never compete with that. What I can see happening is perhaps NX using npm workspaces
yeah.
to better isolate the individual parts of the monorepo. But I think that npm workspaces will never have all the features that NX has. But it's an interesting choice for perhaps you just want to start it out. Perhaps you're not even coding in
Mhm.
Angular. My use case for using npm workspaces was a library, just a node library. It was not for front end. It was actually it was for front end, but also back end. So it was a utilities library that I wanted to create, and I wanted it to work in front end and back end. So any environment that had JavaScript, and this library would also have some helpers that I wanted to isolate. So I tried using npm workspaces to isolate those two things, and it worked out well. But it was a bit of a pain to set things up, and especially to make the
Mhm.
build process work, because your one of the libraries needs to import a sibling, and that doesn't necessarily works out so well with the build system that you might have for a single library. So I think NX already deals with all that setup for us. So I think it would win. But I haven't checked Lerna, so that
Yeah,
could be
like
interesting.
I think Lerna is maybe easier to set up in some cases, but it doesn't have such a big community. And also regarding NX, it's good that it supports not only Angular but also React, Vue, and all the combination of Node.js frameworks. So if you have, I don't know, React and Next, or Angular and Nest, or even if you have Angular and on backend Java or Python or whatever, and you are using some tool to export the types, it works perfectly, and it is very easy to set up.
So what you're saying, Marek, is that Lerna is more flexible than NX. So if you're using things that NX doesn't support, so for example, some parts of your application are outside of the JavaScript ecosystem. So you have, for example, backend microservices, and one of them is in Java, the other is in Elixir or whatever. So Lerna is a monorepo tool
No,
that
no, no,
can
no.
integrate
Sorry, I was
in that
talking about
scenario,
NX
or am I wrong?
with that. I mean, Lerna is maybe easier to maintain when you have just a simple Angular apps, or if you have maybe some simpler use case. But I don't really have a big experience with it. Uh, it would have to be tried. And also there are still some issues even with NX, for example. Angular is doing, like most recently, Angular is doing updates every half a year, and I think now there was a problem that with Angular 15, you couldn't have the most recent version of NX. You needed to wait for the new npm package, or yeah. So those are, but I think those issues are in JavaScript world overall. So this that there are still some troubles with the updates. It's not so consistent. So this is something you need to manage as well. Maybe this is also one of the points what we forgot to talk about when we were talking about the architecture. That it doesn't matter if you have React, Vue, or Angular. You need to have some update plan, and you need to also have in your architecture. You need to think that each 6 months or at least once per year you should do the updating of everything. And this is also a big topic.
Yeah, I think the easiest way will be remove as much dependency as well. Like if you're using NX, you are dependent on
Yeah,
NX. But that's not the uh, like the actual way people are doing. But if you want to update as Angular is updating, or React or Vue, then you should always follow their concept and not depends on other packages.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I think that's what most of the product company do. Like I know one company, I was interviewing with, what he asked me, should I use this very popular, like from backend, I'm saying, should you use the Spring Boot in our product or not? So I said yes, it's widely used, is tested. But what the approach, he told that each and everything should be developed by us, so that we are not depend at all with any other things. But that's, I don't see nowadays it's
Mhm.
happening, or it should happen, because all the packages are also pretty good. And like the NX they are doing. But you might be 3-4 months the
Yeah,
behind the latest release. But
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And those are also these things, like you have two extremes, like you said, not updating at all and having everything written by
Hmm.
you, or having millions of other packages. With the packages and libraries, it's very like this is the thing which I'm not even sure
Yeah.
if there are some rules. It's maybe a little. It's a little bit like you need to be a good artist, yeah. And a good artist, he just knows what he has to do. So even you as a tech lead or software architect, you need to understand like which package to add and which what should be written by yourself. This is like a sixth sense or something like that. I'm not sure if it's possible to define how to decide on it.
Like the
Yeah.
craftsmanship of
Yeah.
development or something.
Yep.
Marek, before we start
I
to
was
wrap things up, I have one question. Um, so, oh, by the way,
No.
sorry, Chuck, you
no,
were
I was
saying
going to
something?
say I was about to start having us wrap up. So go ahead, and then we'll wrap up.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let's see if we have time for just
Yeah.
one more question. Um, so, what I'm wondering is, how are libraries shared between all the micro apps inside your monorepo. So for example, if you install Lodash, like utilities library, and then actually let's use RxJS. Since we're talking about Angular, I think that people will be more familiarized with that. So if you depend on RxJS, okay, but you actually have many sub parts of your application, and maybe RxJS releases a new version and you want to update to this new version, but can you do that part by part in your modularized architecture? Can you update RxJS to a new major version in just one micro application inside your monorepo, or do you have to upgrade in all of them at the same time because they're all sharing the same version of the globally installed library? How does that work?
It's a very good point. And when you have this question, like when your project starts to have this sort of questions, then it's time to move from monorepo to micro apps. Because when you have micro apps, then you can individually update every app as you want. In monorepo, I think,
so there is
yeah,
a difference in
yes,
this definition. So a monorepo, you're sharing things. You have different parts, but they're sharing a global something in common that is being shared. And when you have micro apps, then it is
yes,
completely isolated.
exactly.
Is that right?
And then basically your micro apps are wrapped in one dashboard app or something. They are lazy loaded as well. But the structure is very similar to monorepo, but the difference is exactly in the package management and everything. But yeah, when this becomes a problem, you need to move to the micro apps. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But a good point. I almost forgot about it.
I think if you have a lot of small component, I think if you have a lot of small apps, it's always better to go with either micro apps or micro front end. So
Yeah.
that will be easier in the maintenance phase later.
Yeah. Also, I think this topic, like we talked about a lot of
All
complex
right.
things,
Thank you,
and it
Marek.
brings the idea about having one tech lead or one not senior developer, but someone who understands this on a deep level per project. This is something which companies need to realize.
So companies need to realize that they need to hire Marek to do this
Right.
architecture for them. I completely agree with that. Yes. And how can they do that, Marek? If a company desperately needs to hire you, the code base is all over the place. You're gonna love this project. How can they
Via
contact
LinkedIn
you?
or email, we can do the consultancy.
If people want to follow you and just see, what you're posting or working on or things like that, where do they find you? Like on Twitter? Or
Yeah,
LinkedIn
actually,
or
I really don't have a Twitter.
GitHub?
Yeah, so I'm using only LinkedIn, GitHub, and Medium for now. I think LinkedIn is at least in Europe it is more.
Okay.
It is a bit more comfortable for me to have everything only on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, I'm going to move us along. Now, we did add hey, this is the stuff we've got going on, the stuff we wanted to let people know we're working on. So, Lucas, what are you working on?
Oh, wow. That's a great question because I am just starting a new course today.
Nice.
So I am starting a course on web animations. So if anyone is interested in that, they can go to lucaspaganini.com/web animations. You can type this all together with a hyphen. I'm going to accept you either way that you type this URL. Don't worry. And then this course is not ready yet, but if you go to this URL, you will be able to join the waiting list. And I promise that this is gonna be a very accessible course. I'm not planning on making it super expensive or anything like that. And it will teach you the fundamentals of web animations. So by the end of this small course, you will be able to craft CSS transitions, animations, and also JavaScript animations from scratch, confident, about what you're doing. You will also be able to use libraries, but you will know how those libraries are being used internally. On top of that, if you just want some free content, I will be posting in the next few weeks some practice examples in my YouTube channel. So there you will be able to see me coding some animations from scratch. So you can just check that out for free. So go to lucaspaganini.com. There you will be able to find a link to join the waiting list of this course. And you can also go to my YouTube channel from there and see all those free videos about me coding things from scratch with the pressure of you watching me.
Nice. All right, I'm going to throw mine in here real quick. We've talked a bit about architecture, and the book we're doing for the Developer Book Club on Top End Devs is Clean Architecture by Robert C. Martin, Uncle Bob. He was on the call last week, our kickoff call for the book club. Probably will be there tonight. And so, yeah, go to topenddevs.com/book club if you want to get in on the rest of that. I'm working on getting the video posted from the last one so you can get caught up, right? You can see what our discussion was and what it was like. But yeah, pretty excited about that. We're going to be doing clean architecture through the end of January. And then we're looking at a couple of options for the next book. I had a few people ask me to do the domain-driven design by Eric Evans. And so I've been reaching out to Eric to see if we can get him in. So yeah, 2 architecture books, I guess, back to back, but we'll see how it goes. And then, yeah, just the other few things that I've got going on. I have been doing some coaching consulting with some folks who are trying to get their career, to kind of slide into the next level, right? Whether it's being in leadership or becoming a senior developer or things like that, that just feel stuck. And, I usually help them get unstuck in that half hour, but then, we have ongoing coaching programs that you can join. So if you go to topenddevs.com/coaching, you can pick which level you want. One of them's one-on-one and the other one's a group coaching. If you apply to either one, it doesn't mean that you're locked into that one. We can figure out what's the best fit for you. But getting some pretty good results for some folks. So that's just another thing that we've got going on. And then finally, I've been putting together a directory of JavaScript related resources. And I'm looking for folks to help contribute to that. And all I'm really looking for is, helping find podcasts, blog posts, books, videos, conferences, conference talks, and just get the information into listings is all I'm looking for, right? Nothing fancy. You don't have to be a JavaScript expert. You just have to be able to find it. I don't have time to go and Google all of them and find them all. So if you're interested in doing that, let me know. I can just invite you and give you a content manager account on the directory. And then, yeah, I've been working on tweaking the layouts and, fixing the data fields and stuff on some of those so that you can find what you're looking for. But yeah, right now I'm focused on podcasts and conferences, but we are going to add in like YouTube channels and stuff. So just keep an eye out for that if you want the directory. And yeah, feel free to come contribute if you want to be in the directory, because that's the other thing is I'm hoping to have things set up so that if we add something to the directory and you want to come along and claim it, right, because you're the author or creator, that way you can maintain your own listing and, put in what you need to. So that's what I've got, what I'm working on and what people can go participate in. Subrat, do you have anything that you're working on that you want to let people know about?
Yep, like I'm working on currently on little bit on micro front end and try to make a videos on that, which is long pending for me. And also working on started working on Deno, like it's a Deno or Dino, it depends on who says what. So Dino land. So it's a pretty good thing to approach, like a secure way. No other packages can hack your code, and that's the one I'm going on. And I'm pretty thrilled by Chat GPT. I'm just checking it how you can use it to do a better web application. If there is some APIs or something, but it's a pretty good thing.
Cool. How about you, Marek? Anything you're working on that you want people to know about?
Yeah. Well, actually, there are two things. The first is that I realized that I really love mentoring my colleagues, and I love to show them some ways as a developer. Also, like you mentioned, Charles, that a lot of developers are stuck and they need some push in in some direction, and I think that I know what I need to say to someone, like whether they should be only a senior developer or whether they should strive to something more, to be some manager or something like that. This is really useful. And the second thing is that I'm trying to run my own startup, which is called Sayri, and it's startup for organizations. So if you have a gym or a restaurant, you are able to manage your stuff through that app. And your clients can sorry, your clients can register for an event, or they can, I don't know, book a table in a restaurant or whatever. So it's quite a big thing. And employees of that company, they have also their part in that app. So mainly two things.
Nice. How can people find
It's
your
not
startup,
online yet, so it
Marek?
will be possible only from February or March. But I will post it on LinkedIn definitely.
Or like email Marik, or send him a message.
Yeah. I will push it
Cool.
to the world next year.
All right. Well, now we're going to do picks, and picks are just shout outs about stuff that we like. Let's do it in the same order. Lucas, do you have some picks?
Yes, I do. So in the last episode, I picked the Logitech Brio webcam, which is the one that I'm using right now. Um, I'm going to pick something here that is complementary to that, and it solves all my frustrations with this webcam, which is that I didn't knew how to manually customize things on this webcam. So it was always using the autofocus, the auto white balance, the auto exposure, and I really hate that because for those of you that are watching us on YouTube or other providers that you can actually see our faces, you will notice that my background is completely black. I'm in my studio. Everything here is dark, completely dark, because when I record a video, I want to be able to target the lighting exactly to my face and I don't want it to bounce
Mm-hmm.
on the walls or anything. So everything needs to be black. And my camera, my webcam doesn't understand it. So if you point a webcam to me in this environment, no matter how much light I have on my face, the webcam is going to think that it's still pretty dark and it's going to try to increase the exposure. And then I look like Michael Jackson with powder in my face and it just looks awful. So this is not a good way to start a meeting with a client. And I finally, finally found a way to manually change those settings because Logitech advised the buyers of that camera to install Logi Capture. But this software doesn't allow me to manually customize the exposure. And I've been just trying to deal with making the auto exposure work for me for a while now. And today, I finally found the perfect software for that. So the software is called Logitune. So because you are
Mm-hmm.
tuning your settings, obviously. How come I never thought about that before? So if you install Logitune, now you will be able to manually set the settings of your Logitech Brio or any other Logitech webcam that you're using. So for all of you that are using Logitech webcams, highly recommend using Logitune instead of any other softwares that Logitech provides.
Nice. All right. Subrat, what are your picks?
Yeah, I think the peak I have already said that is the Dino Land. So I was about to pick that one. So I think the new version already came, like 1.28.3. So just go and watch that one and try to use, because as more people will use and the companies will try to grab that, and it is faster. Like you don't need to install anything on the start of the application. It is secure, and somehow I liked it. So I'll pick
Cool.
that one.
Yeah, I've been wanting to play with Dino a little more, but I haven't had time.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and throw out some picks that I have here. One of the picks that I'm going to toss out there is a game. It's a card game. I can't remember if I picked it before. I need to just like keep a list so that I know. But I do pick board games and card games like every week. This one's called Antidote, and it's a card game. And effectively what it is it's pretty simple, but you deal out the cards. Everybody gets a turn, and you can, trade cards. You can pass a card to the right, pass a card to the left, or you can make people discard a card. And what you're doing is you have a bunch of antidotes in your hand, and then you've also got a couple of poisons in your hand. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to, at the end of the game, have the highest number in the correct antidote to the poison that everyone's been poisoned with. And, you usually have 5 or 6 cards in your hand. So, everybody takes a turn until you're done. And, when you discard the cards, you discard them face up in front of you, unless it's an X card, which is one of the poisons, or a syringe. And you can use the syringes to steal a card in front of somebody, or steal a card out of somebody's hand. And I mean, that's pretty much the whole game. It, obviously there's some thinking and paying attention and, seeing what people are doing. But yeah, it's a fun game. Takes about a half hour to play it. It's a game that my kids can play with us. Board Game Geek weights it at 1.62. So like I said, it's a real easy game. But it's a ton of fun, and you can play it with up to like 6 people. So, you can get a group of people together and play it. So I'm going to pick Antidote. I'll put a link in the show notes to that one. A few other picks that I have. So, JavaScript Picks is going to be hosted on a system called Brilliant Directories, and I'll put an affiliate link into there. Just because, if you go sign up for it, then you can do it. I am planning on putting up another directory for Angular at some point, but I'm kind of fine-tuning the process with JavaScript Picks first. So once that's done, I already own the domain for Angular Picks, so we'll be doing that. I also own the domains for several of the other areas that we cover with their picks. So, keep an eye out for that. And then my wife and I started watching the new Criminal Minds. We've been getting it on Paramount Plus. I don't know if it's on TV, like proper TV or not, but it's on Paramount Plus, and it has a lot of the same characters in it that were in Criminal Minds. It's Criminal Minds Evolutions, but we've been enjoying that, so I'm going to pick that too. And I think that's it. Marek, do you have some picks?
Yeah, I definitely have one pick, and it's that since the summer I started to write all the notes down, and I'm using Remarkable. It's like ink tablet where you can write your notes, and it has very good format. It is like a bit smaller than A4, and it's actually like a physical book, because the other e-readers were either too small or too big. And this is exactly as a book. It's very thin. You can write all the notes, and when I'm thinking, I just when I have the pen in my hand, it allows me to think and to organize my ideas. So I think it's much better than before when I was using some to-do apps or something like that. So I definitely recommend Remarkable.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for coming, Marek. Good to see you guys, Subrat and Lucas. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And until next time, folks, Max out.